Right there in the Coalwood Summit lobby, with the smell of lily flower candles hanging in the air and crystal glasses clinking, my future son-in-law pointed at me and said loudly, "Don't let him stand near the main entrance. People will think this wedding hired a woodcutter to fill out the aesthetic." That line made 3 tables turn around at once like I was some cheap decoration. My daughter, adjusting her wedding dress, gave a thin smile. "Dad's not used to classy environments. Maybe stand a little farther back so you don't mess up the aesthetic." They said it right to my face as if I wasn't her father. Just a shadow standing there for them to insult one more time to make things complete. If you've ever tasted the feeling of being treated like the extra at a place that should have belonged to you, ever heard your own child use a crowd to measure your worth, leave a single dot. And if you want to walk with me to the end of this road of truth, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit subscribe to catch the next part. Allow me to tell my story. Blue Willow Forest in early June always carries a strange kind of light, a thin, silky glow as if the woods are guarding something from the chaos of the outside world. For 15 years, I, Harrison Cole, 63 years old, have lived inside that light. An old wooden cabin I built myself, a Ford F-150 from 2003, and a dirt trail cutting through the woods down into the valley. To the town at the foot of the mountain, I'm just the old woodcutter who likes living alone. I let them think that silence is sometimes the safest way to live. But 6 miles from Blue Willow Forest, on the mist-covered ridge of the Smoky Range, there's a place called Coalwood Summit Lodge, the most luxurious resort among the 3 lodges I own. What no one at Coalwood Summit knows, not even my daughter, is that the true owner of all 3 lodges, of the entire stretch of land at top the Smokies, is me. My name sits buried deep in the legal layers under shell companies. Only my late wife Aubrey's old attorney still remembers. The regular employees at the summit know me by another name. Hank, the quiet old maintenance man, the one who fixes squeaky hinges, replaces light cords, hands out moisture control powder, and clears pine sap off the front porch. A man paid by the hour who wouldn't survive without chopping a little extra firewood in the forest. That's the role I chose, and they all follow one rule I gave them, an unwritten NDA no one dares to break. Don't mention my name in front of guests. Don't contact me outside of maintenance work, and absolutely don't tell Aubrey. They think I'm an old, broke laborer living off calloused hands, and I let them think that. I wanted to stay in control. I wanted my daughter to live a life where she didn't see her father's wealth overshadow every choice she made. Then the day she demanded I be removed from the wedding guest list, that disguise became the cruel proof that she had forgotten who her father truly is. This afternoon at the Coalwood Summit Lodge itself, her wedding will take place. A ceremony people are calling the Wedding of the Year, and the guest list does not include my name. Aubrey Cole, the little girl who clung to my shoulders every night after her mother died. The child who once stood on a wooden step, tiny hands helping me hammer the very first nail of the cabin. She used to say she wanted to grow up like her mother, strong, kind, simple. But people don't grow in straight lines. They get pulled off course by the kind of light they mistake for glory. That light has a name, Dylan Mercer. I never liked him from the first time we met. A wide smile with no warmth in it. A suit too perfect for someone who calls himself a startup founder. The way he talks is like he's giving a TED talk to his own reflection. The way he looked around the lodge the first time he stepped in, full of evaluation, measuring, calculating. But what bothered me most was how he made my daughter believe her father didn't fit the image she wanted for her new life. One afternoon in March, I went down to Coalwood Summit to check the backup electrical system. When I stepped into the lobby, I saw Aubrey standing in the lodge's sitting room, wearing a wedding dress flowing across the floor like petals, and Dylan adjusting her veil as if directing a film scene. I stood tucked in a corner. My hands were still covered in sawdust. Aubrey saw me first. She hesitated a little and said, "Dad, you're here." I smiled lightly. "I came to check the system. Just happened to see you." Aubrey turned to Dylan as if waiting for a green light. Then she took a breath and said the sentence that changed everything. "Dad, if you come to the wedding, the aesthetic will be ruined. I want everything perfect. You understand? I hadn't even reacted when Dylan cut in, voice soft but sharp as a blade. Don't take it the wrong way. We love you, but the guests are all from Nashville, Atlanta, and Dallas, all industry people. Everyone dresses and shows up as they stepped out of a magazine. I'm just afraid you'll be off tone. A bridesmaid behind them giggled. Dylan continued, and if you wear that flannel shirt, people will think you're lodge staff. I mean, you fit the groundskeeping vibe more than wedding ceremony, right? Aubrey didn't deny it. She only lowered her voice. Don't mind it, Dad. Dylan's just joking, but I really want everything coordinated. You understand, right? I wasn't angry. I only felt something cold slide from my sternum down to my fingertips. Then I'll give you what you want. But the humiliation didn't end there. As I walked toward the parking lot, I heard them telling the planner, make sure the photo line doesn't include Dad to keep the aesthetic, just immediate family. Thank you, immediate family, and I was excluded. The next afternoon, Dylan called me, Dad, about the wedding costs. I'm being honest, I'll cover my part. I don't want people thinking I rely on you, and an old cabin and a worn-out truck won't earn respect. Don't be upset. Nowadays, people look at who pays to know who has the power. I stayed silent. Aubrey took the phone. Don't mind Dylan. It's just I don't want you burdened. And if you can't contribute, then you don't have to show up. So people won't talk. I heard every word clearly. So people won't talk. They didn't want me there because I looked poor, because I wear flannel, because I live in a cabin, because I don't fit the vibe, and they didn't know I'm the one who pays the general manager of the very lodge they're proudly taking wedding photos in. That night, I returned to the cabin and opened the wooden safe. Inside were three things: my wife's photo, the event contract of Colwood Summit Lodge, and a yellow folder I had quietly asked someone to investigate 3 months ago. My fingers stopped at a familiar line. Clause 14. In a C, right to suspend non-essential services. I remembered Dylan's smug smile, remembered my daughter's eyes when she said I didn't fit the aesthetic. I touched my wife's picture once, then closed the safe. If you choose illusions, then I'll let you see their price. Night settled over the cabin, soft as the forest's exhale. I sat by the fireplace, slowly making a cup of black coffee. Not angry, not sad, just a strange calm spreading through me. The kind of calm I only have when I'm preparing to face a storm whose path I already know. And that storm will begin at the very wedding my daughter thinks she has full control over. After being barred from the wedding for aesthetic reasons, I didn't go home right away. I drove my old Ford F-150 up the high ridge that looked straight down at Colwood's Summit Lodge. Evening mist clung to the windshield like a thin layer of dust. From there, the Ivory Lodge rose out of the forest like someone else's castle, a place my own daughter believed I was unworthy to step into. I turned off the engine and sat in silence. Wind hit the truck cabin in soft pulses. I pulled out my phone and looked at the message thread saved under Important. The latest text was from Dylan, sent at 11:04 that morning. Don't come anymore, not the vibe. My guests are all finance people. You'll feel embarrassed. Right below was Aubrey's message. I'm sorry, but I really don't want anyone judging you. You understand? That was the line that cut deepest. Not, I don't want you judged, but she didn't want to be judged for having me there. I closed the phone and opened the investigation file again. The private investigator had given me 3 major points. Mercer Energy Group has no extraction license. Sole shareholder. Dylan website costing $15. Template copied from another company. Financial history. Account balance $2,143. Credit card debt $8,900. Knoxville casino debt $27,000. A top-tier entrepreneur, as my daughter called him. I stacked the documents and slid them into the old leather bag. First task, meet Mark, the general manager of Colwood Summit, to finalize the protocol for the wedding day. I met Mark in the office behind the exhibition hall, a small, tidy room with yellow pine walls. He stood up as soon as I walked in, his voice slightly tense. Mr. Cole, I just heard Aubrey said, you're not attending the wedding. I set the folder on the desk. Correct. And because I'm not attending, I need you to follow the contract exactly. He blinked, confused. I opened the page marked in red. Clause 14C. The right to suspend all non-essential services if the final payment is not transferred before 400 p.m. on the event day. Mark swallowed. We've never triggered 14C. True, but it exists for a reason, and this time that reason is named Dylan Mercer. I didn't tell him everything, only turned my iPad toward him. A series of photos showing Dylan in a Knoxville parking lot holding betting slips, face flushed with alcohol. Mark exhaled quietly. I need you to keep this clause in pending status. If by 4 p.m. on the wedding day the money hasn't arrived, you follow the contract. No leniency, no exceptions. Mark stayed silent for a moment, then nodded. If that's the owner's request, I'll do it. I looked him straight in the eye. This isn't just a request, it's a lesson. Mark signed the 14C pending protocol. The first gear of the plan began to turn. 2 weeks before the wedding, I returned to the lodge again. That time I didn't plan to see Aubrey. I only stopped by to review several summer maintenance items that only the lodge owner would know. But the moment I stepped onto the wooden hallway leading to the lobby, I witnessed a scene that after 63 years of life, I never imagined I would have to hear with my own ears. Dylan was in the main lobby with the wedding planner and the mother of a bridesmaid. None of them noticed me standing behind a wooden pillar only 3 steps away. The planner asked about the front row seating. What about the father of the bride's spot? Dylan laughed, a sharp sound that made my spine go cold. Leave it empty. Aubrey's dad. No, he's, how do I put it? Like a maintenance guy who wandered into the event. Old flannel shirt, hands always covered in sawdust. One look and you know he's not our crowd. The planner hesitated. But what if guests ask? Dylan shrugged. Say he's busy or fishing or drunk. Whatever. Just make sure no one sees him. Honestly, if he sits in the front row, the entire aesthetic collapses. The woman laughed and said a line I will remember sound for sound. Oh God, so he's exactly like those old forest men, huh? Like the type who build rottenwood cabins on TV. Dylan replied instantly, exactly that. You can see the poverty in him. My hand was in my pocket, clenched until my knuckles cracked. But I didn't step out. I didn't say a word. Silence is the best way to make people careless. When they left, I walked straight to the electrical room. Every step echoed inside me like stones thrown into a deep well. 3 days before the wedding, Aubrey called me. Her voice trembled with excitement. Dad, we just added last-minute guests. Some people from the CEO Retreat Club, all founders and investors. Don't worry, we can handle it. Dylan said we might book the penthouse for them. I sat on the cabin steps, looking at my dirt-stained boots. Good. Then remember not to let me ruin your aesthetic. Aubrey gave a forced laugh. Dad, don't say that. I mean, you have your life, but this wedding? I want people to think I'm stepping into a new world. A world where I had no place. I understood. Then I won't come. I heard her soft exhale. Relief, not sadness. That confirmed one truth. She had erased me from her heart long before she erased me from the guest list. But in that same moment, I knew when people reject what's real, they eventually pay with their collapse in front of everyone. I stood and brushed dirt off my jeans. Prepare well, the rest let reality handle. The wedding day arrived. The sky over the Smoky Mountains was so blue it looked unreal. Coalwood Summit sparkled like a gemstone in the forest. Limousines lined the driveway. Tuxedos, lavender satin, champagne already uncorked. I stood among the trees, hand resting on the truck door, watching. Aubrey appeared on the second-floor balcony. Beautiful, young, painfully innocent. Dylan stood beside her, adjusting his tie, smiling like a man who thought he'd conquered the world. But the only thing truly winning was the truth. I muttered a quiet promise. It's time, Aubrey. You want false light. I'll show you how fast it dies. Just as the violins began to play, Mark's phone buzzed. Final payment not received. 14C. Prepare to activate. And from that moment on, the storm I had prepared in silence began to rise. Coalwood Summit in the late afternoon is the kind of moment when the Smoky Mountains are so beautiful, they make people forget every mistake they've ever made. The last sunlight poured over the wedding plaza like diluted honey, turning everything gold. The ghost chairs, the lilac satin ribbons, the sparkling champagne glasses, all designed to create the perfect wedding photo. If everything was paid on time. I stood on the hillside behind the lodge among tall pines, watching from afar through an old military binocular. Aubrey was taking pictures with her bridesmaids, her wedding dress soft as moving water, her lips curved in the kind of smile I once hoped she would keep all her life. Dylan was with his groomsmen, bragging about the same recycled story of Mercer Energy Group, about to be listed on OTC, sounding like guys who just made a little money during a crypto bull run. I checked the watch on my wrist. From the walkie-talkie clip to GM Mark's belt, the accountant's voice came through. Transfer still not in. Payment code failed. Insufficient funds. Mark stared at the screen for a long moment, as if he couldn't believe it. He looked up at the shimmering wedding scene in front of him, then toward the forest where he knew I was standing. Then he walked to the DJ booth. No one noticed. No one knew. No one suspected. The violins were playing Claire de Lune. The music was so beautiful that guests from Chicago, Boston, and Charleston were already turning around to post Instagram stories. The white piano in the garden sat neatly under the willow tree like something out of a painting. Mark leaned toward the DJ's ear and handed him the order signed 14C pending. Activate upon failure. The DJ's eyes widened. Right now, the ceremony hasn't started. Protocol, Mark said, voice low. Shut down all non-essential services. Switch to emergency conservation mode. The DJ took a breath and pressed the button. The sound from the Bose system went silent instantly. Not the kind of off switch with a loud click. No, it was absolutely quiet, like someone had pulled all the oxygen out of the air. The speakers died without a sound, leaving only wind and the breath of the crowd. Then, next, the overhead and garden lights dimmed to about 60%. Not fully off because that would be illogical for a functioning resort, but lowered to a safe, energy-conserving level, exactly as Clause 14C specified. The scene looked as if someone had twisted a giant dial to turn the event from luxury to minimalist. Guests began murmuring, "Huh? Why are the lights dim? Where's the DJ? Why did the music stop?" "The bar. I think the bar just closed." Correct. The head bartender had received Mark's notice through the internal system, suspend alcohol service. He immediately pulled down the bar curtain and locked the liquor safe. The bartenders exchanged confused looks, but followed procedure without question. Catering was shut down as well. The head chef signaled the staff to stop bringing out appetizers. The servers began pulling back the trays in their hands as if the party had ended without warning. A silence, both confused and heavy, spread through the rows of seats. The MC ran onto the stage, looking at Mark one last time before lifting the microphone. He took a breath, his face pale. "Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony is temporarily suspended due to unresolved billing issues." The last two words, billing issues, dropped like a stone into a still lake. The ripple spread fast, loud, chaotic. Aubrey stood frozen. The smile on her lips vanished completely. One bridesmaid thought the MC had misread the script. She laughed loudly. "Come on, this is a joke, right?" No one answered. The wealthy guests, with glossy pinned hair and champagne glasses in hand, began whispering. They didn't pay. A top lodge in the Smokies shutting down the bar. God, whose wedding even is this? I saw a bridesmaid pull out her iPhone. Camera on. She tilted her face, voice full of adrenaline. OMG, guys, this wedding is collapsing in real time. Look at this. The lights just dimmed, the bar is shut, and the DJ is dead silent. This is crazy. In less than half a minute, that video hit TikTok. The hashtag guru Coalwood wedding started climbing. A man in the third row looked around. Where's the groom? Did he go fix the payment? No one could find Dylan. Aubrey spun, searching for him in the crowd. Nothing. Her wedding dress twirled in the evening breeze like a frightened white cloud. "Dylan!" she called into the stage mic, her voice shaking. "Baby, where are you?" No reply. Mark stepped up beside Aubrey, explaining quietly. I couldn't hear him, but I knew every word he said. In the end, they didn't pay enough. The system activated automatically. I'm truly sorry. Aubrey stared at Mark as if he were speaking another language. Then she looked at the guests, then at the server's clearing table. Linens were even though the ceremony hadn't begun. The elegant atmosphere turned into an evacuation scene. An older woman in a navy dress cleared her throat. "Has anyone called management? This must be a system mistake, right? No way! A wedding like this just powers down." A silver-haired businessman replied, "Not a power failure. This is emergency mode. I've seen it when corporate clients don't pay on time." The crowd, realizing what they had been refusing to believe, began looking at Aubrey with a mix of pity and curiosity. On stage, Aubrey trembled. "Mark, this is my wedding. You have to turn everything back on right now." Mark shook his head. "Without final payment, we are not allowed. Clause 14C has activated exactly as written." Aubrey stepped back. No way. Dylan said he transferred it." Mark opened his tablet, showing her the red text. "Transfer failed. Insufficient funds." Aubrey collapsed onto the steps, no longer caring if her dress got dirty. One of her friends rushed over. "Obs, where's Dylan? Where is he?" Aubrey choked. I don't know." The live-streaming bridesmaid walked closer, shoving the camera toward her face. "Aubrey, girl, say something to the viewers. How do you feel about the lodge shutting down your wedding?" I stood from afar, looking down. Not happy, not satisfied, just silent. Guests started, stepping back as if avoiding a fire. Servers kept clearing tables. Each napkin pulled, each glass collected. The sound of utensils clinking into metal trays rang out like cold steel. Aubrey was left alone on the stage, her arms wrapped around herself, the dimmed lights casting over her like an unfinished sketch. She kept repeating, "Where's Dylan? Where's Dylan?" But that night, no one stepped up to hold her. No one shielded her, and Dylan, just as I predicted, vanished the exact moment responsibility arrived. A wedding of the century, a historic shutdown. A new hashtag is beginning to spread. Sex. Coal would collapse. The Coalwood Summit Ballroom no longer looked like a place meant for a wedding. The lights were still in energy-saving mode, casting that dull yellow glow of parties being cleaned up after all the guests have gone home. The reception tables were half cleared, linens rolled up, the bar closed, staff whispering to each other in low voices as if some accident had just happened. But none of that was the final blow meant for my daughter. The ballroom doors burst open, not from the garden side, but from the hallway leading to the parking lot. A middle-aged couple walked in, both dressed like elegant groom's parents. The man in a light gray suit and moss-green tie. The woman in a champagne midi dress, her hair curled in that refined East Coast style. But what caught my attention wasn't their outfits. It was the fact that they walked in at the exact moment everything was falling apart, and they showed absolutely no surprise. In fact, they exhaled in relief like they had just finished a heavy shift. The man, who I would later learn was named Trent Whitlock, pulled a pack of cigarettes from his suit pocket. Right there in the ballroom, with hundreds of guests still scattered around, he lit one calmly, exhaling smoke like he was backstage at a Broadway theater instead of at a luxury wedding. A wave of whispers rose. Is he smoking in the ballroom? Does anyone know them? Aren't those the groom's parents? The woman, Valerie, slipped off her heels onto the hardwood floor, rubbing her feet, then checking her watch. "Right on wrap time," she said, voice tired but casual. "I thought we had to keep acting for another 30 minutes. Aubrey heard every word. She stood only about 10 feet away in the dim ballroom light. Her face had gone ghost white. Mascara streaked into two long smudges like ink dragged down a ruined painting. Aubrey stepped closer, her voice trembling so badly people had to strain to hear it. You're Dylan's mother. Why? Why did you say acting? Valerie sighed, speaking in a tone meant for a director, not for a devastated bride. Sweetheart, we're actors. Dylan hired us for 4 hours, $600 flat. He said he needed parents who look upper class. That's all. We just did what the contract asked. That sentence detonated inside the ballroom. Not a loud explosion, but the kind that makes everything come apart. Every guest, those who were already holding phones to record the wedding collapse, lifted their cameras higher. Shutter clicks erupted. Live streams went live. Comments flashed so fast the screens blurred. A bridesmaid gasped and covered her mouth. "Oh my God, he rented his parents!" An older man whispered to his wife, "This is fraud, dear God." Aubrey stood perfectly still. Valerie continued as if delivering the last lines of a script. "We didn't know the ceremony hadn't finished, but our contracted time is up. We have another show in Gatlinburg. Hope you understand." Trent tapped his cigarette on a nearby table, then voice drained. "You know, Dylan told us this was just a content wedding. Shoot some clips to put online. I thought it was one of those new trends." A wave of humiliation swept through the ballroom. Aubrey stepped back, hands shaking, mouth open, but voiceless. Her hair fell limp, the layers of hairspray no longer holding the perfect bridal style. The same guests who had called her an iconic bride that morning now looked at her with the kind of expression no bride ever wants, pity mixed with curiosity and disbelief. Kelly, the bridesmaid closest to Aubrey since college, walked up, not to hug her, not to shield her, not to comfort her. Kelly looked at Aubrey as if she were watching someone who had destroyed her own life. And then Kelly said the line that made the entire ballroom stop breathing. She built an entire life just to show it online, and right now that life is turning its back on her. Aubrey looked like she'd been slapped. She turned toward the large mirror mounted on the ballroom wall, the one the planner had set up for guests to check their aesthetic. In the reflection stood a bride who never made it to her vows, mascara running in 2 black rivers, the dimmed lights making her look like a disaster of a character after a ruined shoot. Mirror humiliation. Double the shame because the first witness is yourself. A young guest lifted her camera toward the mirror. "Oh my God, this is cinematic. The bride is realizing everything was fake." Someone else added, "He hired his own parents. This is peak delusion." Aubrey pressed a hand to the mirror, her foundation smeared in a blurred print. She whispered so softly it barely reached the air, but the ballroom was silent enough to catch it. "No. No way. Dylan wouldn't do this to me. He wouldn't." But at that moment, the world didn't care whether Dylan would or wouldn't. The world only cared that all of it was being filmed live. Valerie adjusted her hair, offering a professional smile. "Sweetheart, I know you're shocked, but we're just working. Dylan said he needed groom's parents for an East Coast tycoon vibe. Honestly, I think you deserved a proper wedding." The line landed like both pity and execution. The ballroom became a stage where every actor had been unmasked. Everything Aubrey had tried to build, her aesthetic lifestyle, her success, her illusion of marrying into a higher class, was stripped bare in an instant. Guests began commenting without restraint. The bride got scammed. The groom fled. The in-laws are actors. This is a real wedding collapse. A man snorted. "I'm not sure what's more shocking, the shutdown or this." Valerie walked out, Trent following. They exited the ballroom like 2 performers finishing a Sunday matinee. When the door closed, the soft click echoed like the final applause of a play. Aubrey stood there alone under the dim lights among half-cleared tables, surrounded by hundreds of staring eyes and phones still streaming live. And in that moment, I knew this was only the first floor of the Tower of Truth. The remaining floors would be far more merciless. The Colwood Summit Ballroom was still drowning in the dimmed glow of energy-saving mode when the DJ booth suddenly lit up, not with the warm, romantic lighting of a wedding reception, but with the cold blue clinical glare of a digital LED screen, the kind used to display pricing charts at conferences or project the face of someone being reprimanded at a shareholder meeting. The DJ was still there, not yet dismissed because he hadn't signed the shift-ending paperwork with management. On his laptop screen, a file had just been airdropped to him with a very clear name: Mercer Fraud Package Final Cut. He frowned, looking around for the sender. In the corner of the ballroom where the hillside's shadow dipped into the room, I stood alone. No one else noticed, but the DJ saw the sender ID, Harrison's iPad. No words were needed. He pressed accept. The LED wall behind the stage lit up, filling with a stark black background. The ballroom, already chaotic, fell silent in one collective breath at the unexpected sight. Phones that were live streaming all turned toward the screen as if everyone sensed they were about to witness something far bigger than a wedding. With the music shut off, bold white text appeared. The truth about Dylan Mercer. A few guests gasped. Oh my God. Someone else let out a startled laugh. Oh my Lord, is this a presentation? And then it began. The first slide appeared. Photos of Dylan walking out of the Knoxville casino holding chip cash-out slips. Not one photo, many photos. Different days, different angles. A male guest frowned. Didn't the groom say he's a CEO? What kind of CEO is at the casino every night? An older woman whispered to her husband. And here I thought Mercer Energy Group was a real energy company. Laughter burst from the back. Aubrey was breathing hard. The next slide. Civil judgments and court records. Mercer visits Flynn. Civil judgment, $18,400. Unpaid debt. Knox County Court. Case number 22. CV1190, failure to compensate contractor small claims, $6,200. Bounce check. A guest cried out, Jesus, the groom is being sued everywhere. Another said, half laughing, half pitting, this isn't a wedding anymore. This is a traveling courtroom. Aubrey staggered and grabbed a pillar. Next slide. Debt-begging emails. Just need $2,500 to flip things. We'll repay in 10 days. Don't tell Aubrey. The last part, don't tell Aubrey, expanded across the entire screen like a punch to my daughter's dignity. Guests screamed, no way! A girl live streaming yelled into her phone, this is insane! The bride didn't know anything! Aubrey collapsed onto the stage steps. The next slide made the room erupt in cruel laughter. The MercerEnergyGroup.com website, a free template, cheap layout, watermark still on the logo, content copied from a Texas energy firm. A young guest said, oh my God, the $15 company. An older businessman snorted, he's not a CEO, he's cosplaying a CEO. Laughter spread viciously through the hall. Aubrey could no longer stand. She dropped to her knees, hands on the floor, mascara dragging into two dark rivers. Phones zoomed in on her, voices floated around her. She really didn't know this is humiliating. Her whole aesthetic life just collapsed. Kelly stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes sharp with bitter clarity. Someone in the back shouted, who sent this? Who exposed him? The DJ looked toward the forest where I stood. I didn't move. Another guest walked closer to film each slide in detail. The world needs to see this. This is next-level fraud. A young woman whispered sympathetically. If it didn't come out today, when would it? A man yelled. Where's the groom? Bring him out! No one could find Dylan. That was the final humiliation. The man responsible vanished as if he never existed. The ballroom turned into a public court. The LED screen, the judge, the guests, the jury, and Aubrey, the only one without counsel. Phones everywhere rose to capture the bride, collapsing under the cold, dimmed light, the massive screen behind her exposing the groom's real face. A guest murmured, she chose an illusion, and the illusion betrayed her. Aubrey covered her face, sobbing amid whispers, camera clicks, stray laughter, and the heavy breaths of people witnessing a perfectly curated aesthetic life blowing apart. And I stood on the hillside in silence, not happy, Not vindicated, just silent. The silence of a father who knows that sometimes to save your child, you must let them see the full truth with their own eyes. The Colwood Summit Ballroom had just endured informational bombardment from the still glowing LED screen when the side door near the hall opened again. Trent and Valerie returned like two supporting actors who hadn't finished their final scene, but this time there was no backstage nonchalance. Their faces were serious, slightly tense, their eyes flashing with something that looked like debt collection. Valerie lifted her dress slightly and stepped into the center of the room, her voice louder, sharper. "Honey, we need to settle something before we head to our next show." Aubrey looked up, mascara streed, eyes red like someone whose emotions had been wrung dry. What now?" Trent held up a printed receipt from the resort's POS system. "Our acting company didn't receive Dylan's payment. His company card just got declined right at the front desk." A ripple of shock spread like an electric jolt. Declined? What kind of CEO has a declined card? Oh, Lord, he couldn't even pay the actors. Valerie crossed her arms. Purely business, purely contract mode. "Sweetheart, our contract is $600 flat rate. 2 roles, groom's mother and groom's father. Dylan said he'd pay with the company card, but that company card ain't very company." Harsh laughter scattered across the ballroom. A young guest recording TikTok whispered into her camera. "Plot twist, the groom still owes money to the fake parents he hired." Trent looked around. "We don't want to make this harder for you, but we need to get paid. Rules are rules." Aubrey clutched the hem of her dress, her voice cracking. I don't have cash on me. My bag. It's in the bridal suite." Valerie shrugged, her expression both pitying and professional. "It's fine, honey, don't stress. We can take collateral. Hand us something to hold and we'll leave." An older guest cleared her throat. "Collateral at a wedding? Good heavens!" Trent pointed at Aubrey's hand. "The ring!" The room fell silent for a fraction of a second. Then, like a cruel domino effect, the crowd began chanting, "Give her the ring! 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 Ring!" A group of young guests pushed their cameras closer, clearly hungry for the next humiliation layer. Aubrey instinctively stepped back, covering her wedding ring. The only thing she believed was real tonight. "This is my wedding ring. I can't." Valerie cut her off, her voice soft but scalpel sharp. "Honey, Dylan bought that ring with a maxed-out credit card. We know because he bragged about it while coaching us in character. He literally said, 'The ring just needs to look good for Instagram.'" Aubrey flinched as if slapped. A bridesmaid clutched her chest. "Oh my God, he really said that." Valerie nodded. "If you don't believe me, I have the rehearsal recording. He complained the ring looked cheap, but said, 'Doesn't matter. They only look at the first 10 seconds of the proposal video.'" Someone in the room cursed. Another shook his head. "He's a scammer on every level." Aubrey tried to stay upright, but her legs trembled. Valerie extended her hand firm. "The ring. A contract is a contract." Trent added, "Think of it as temporary. When Dylan pays, if he pays, we'll mail it back with a tracking number." A guest snorted. "He'll never pay. Not in this lifetime." The ballroom now resembled an arena of spectacle. Dozens of phones raised, cameras recording from every angle, the pale LED light illuminating a bride being forced to remove her ring at what should have been the happiest moment of her life. Aubrey lifted her hand but was shaking so badly she couldn't twist the ring off. Valerie remained patient but cold. "Honey, breathe. Turn it to the left. That's it." Aubrey tried. The ring stuck. The crowd buzzed. "She can't even get it off. The bride has nothing left to lose." Someone filmed a close-up, zooming in on Aubrey's trembling fingers. The video would go viral. I knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. Finally, the ring slipped free, but because Aubrey's hands were shaking so violently, it fell to the wooden floor with a metallic clang, like a surgical instrument hitting tile. The ring rolled almost 6 feet before stopping under a chair, knocked over earlier in the chaos. No one picked it up. Everyone just filmed. Zoom, Zoom closer. Zoom until the reflection of Aubrey's mascara streaks glistened on the cheap silver-plated metal. Valerie walked over, bent down, picked it up between two fingers, examining it under the dim lights like a prop. Pretty in a cheap way. Aubrey heard it. She swayed, both hands covering her head as if trying to block out the sound. A guest blurted, "This is humiliation layer 4, I'm dying." Another whispered to her friend, "This isn't a wedding anymore. This is a documentary called How to Ruin a Bride in 5 Steps. Trent slipped the ring into his suit pocket and buttoned it. "All right, we've got the collateral. We'll head to our show in Gatlinburg. Good luck with all this." Valerie looked at Aubrey one last time. Not cruel, not tender, just with the weary eyes of an adult who sees someone pay the price for chasing a cheap illusion. "Sweetheart, when you're ready to hear the truth, ask yourself why a man needs to hire his own family." Aubrey didn't answer. She stood there, arms limp at her sides, the bare finger on her hand, the final proof that her entire life, piece by piece, was being stripped away in front of hundreds of witnesses. Trent and Valerie turned and walked out. The ballroom door closed behind them with a sharp clack, the sound of a roll being declared. Out. The ballroom sank back into metallic silence. Guests kept filming. Phones kept live streaming. Aubrey stood in the center of the floor, staring at her empty finger, unable to speak. And that was the moment when a bride lost not only her ceremony, not only her groom, not only her dignity, but even a wedding ring that had never held any real worth. The Colwood Summit Ballroom had already endured the shutdown, the exposed actors, the exposed groom, the lost ring, things that seemed impossible to sink lower then. But life has layers of hell no one believes they will ever step into until the door opens right in front of them. The large front doors slammed open hard enough to strike the wall with a heavy thud. Every guest turned. 3 men walked in. Not the kind of men who attend a wedding. The one in front was broad-shouldered, wearing a dark blue shirt with half-sleeve tattoos and a thick silver chain around his neck. The other 2 wore simple black suits with no ties, carrying the quiet seriousness of men who do business at night. None of them looked like intruders, and that was what made the room go cold. They were on the guest list. Legitimate assigned seats, names printed on place cards. No one understood why. The man leading the group spoke, his voice a blend of New Jersey and Tennessee, deep, calm, not needing to threaten because the air silenced itself for him. "We don't want trouble. We just need to see Dylan Mercer. Today's the deadline. He owes $420,000. The room went dead still. A woman gasped, "Oh my God." Someone live streaming screamed, "You guys, this is wild! Loan sharks just walked in!" I watched from the Trian. Everything was still within my prediction. Dylan was stupid enough to put them on the guest list to fit the wealthy vibe. Yes, he needed them to pose as business partners to look impressive to Aubrey's family. He didn't expect that very choice would make their presence legitimate when they entered the ballroom. In his mind, this luxury wedding was a credibility stage, proof that he had money, power, class, enough to impress Rocco, to show he wasn't some petty debtor, that the $420,000 was just a small amount he could settle after the ceremony. He also believed the wedding envelopes from wealthy guests from Chicago, Nashville, and Charleston would give him enough cash to pay at least a portion of the debt. The stupid part was thinking wedding gifts would pay his debt. The foolish part was believing a pretty wedding could hide the truth that his pockets were empty. The man, Rocco Vanetti, pulled an envelope from his suit and held it up. "This is the loan contract signed by Dylan Mercer. Date issued, date due, total owed $420,000. We came for a reminder not to bother anyone." The ballroom erupted with whispers. A guest trembled. $420,000, and he booked a resort wedding. Another, where did he even get the credit to owe that much? And then, like a character walking into a scene he didn't rehearse, Dylan appeared at the edge of the hall, hair messy, vest wrinkled, face pale like someone drained of blood. He froze, staring at Rocco, then at the crowd holding dozens of phones pointed at him. Dylan swallowed. Step back. Rocco, Rocco didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply said, like requesting someone pay a missing meal bill. We're not here to hurt you, just to take you to the person you need to meet. You know that. Dylan looked around, wild, cornered like an animal. Then he saw Aubrey, torn dress, mascara, street face, eyes full of pain. He screamed, You come here! Aubrey shook her head, terrified, stepping back. And then, in a moment that detonated the ballroom into screams, Dylan lunged at her, grabbed her arm, yanking her like a bag of belongings. Aubrey lost her balance. She slammed into the ceremonial table stacked with dozens of crystal glasses. Crash! Crystals shattered. The sound was sharp, violent, like stones thrown into glass walls. Shards fell at her feet, one cutting into her skin. Aubrey collapsed, crying out, H! Ah! Blood seeped through the white tulle. The entire room screamed. Camera volume tripled. Live streams. He just pushed the bride. This is crazy. Rocco's face darkened. He signaled his men. He stepped into the center, voice low but echoing like a verdict. No one hurts a woman in front of me. No one. The two men restrained Dylan. Not violent, not beating him, just securing his arms with the practiced precision of escorting a debtor. Rocco bent down to help Aubrey stand. Miss, we're only here for the debt. Nothing to do with you. Let us take him. No harm to anyone else. Logical, direct, clean, legally sound. Dylan thrashed. Rocco, not today. This is my wedding. Rocco replied cold and final. This is not a wedding anymore, Mercer. This is the due date. The sentence sent chills through the entire ballroom. The men escorted Dylan between two rows of guests, like leading the criminal out of the scene. With every step he took, phones pushed closer. Guests yelled, Pay your debt! Don't drag her into it! The bride is bleeding! A girl liver-reamed Aubrey so close the drops of blood falling from her leg to the wooden floor were fully visible. OMG, guys! She's bleeding! The bride is bleeding! Aubrey tried to stand, gripping the shattered table, breath uneven. Crystal shards glittered around her feet like the broken pieces of her life. Sharp, cold, dangerous, reflecting the crowd watching like it was a show. Rocco looked at her, voice softer. I'm sorry about what happened. He's our responsibility, but we don't hurt women. Do you need a medic? We'll call one. No one expected the lone shark to be the only person acting with ethics tonight. Before leaving, Rocco turned to the guests. We are escorting Dylan Mercer for a business matter. No threats, no danger. No one needs to be afraid. His voice was steady, clear, like an airport announcement. The men pushed Dylan through the doors. He screamed, echoing through the hall. Don't take me! I can pay! I just need time! The doors closed. His voice vanished behind the thick walls of Coalwood Summit. The ballroom fell into a ghostly silence, broken only by Aubrey's choked sobs and the faint dripping of blood onto the floor. She wasn't just abandoned, not just exposed, not just stripped of her ring. She had just watched her groom dragged away by his creditors at her own wedding in front of hundreds of eyes. Wind from the Coalwood Range swept down, cold enough to make every pine needle tremble in the dark, while the yellow lights from the North Trail Lodge gate washed over the road in a faded paper glow. Aubrey was gently escorted outside by two security staff. No one touched her, no one pushed, no one spoke harshly. They simply followed resort protocol for guests. No longer invalid lodging status. After Clause 14C had been activated, the way they kept one respectful step away, their voices, polite yet distant, hurt more than any physical force could. Mud, perfume, and torn fabric streak across the white silk of her dress, now gray like cooled ashes. From a distance, the ballroom behind her was pitch dark, with only the blinking red exit signs flickering like dying heartbeats, and the murmurs of guests, the clatter of servers clearing pots and pans, the bartenders dumping leftover liquor. All of it became the backdrop to the moment her life went into freefall. One of the security guards spoke softly. Miss Aubrey, When 14C activates, all guests without valid lodging records are classified as non-client presence. Per severe county regulations, the resort is required to clear the area. If you need medical assistance, we can call. They spoke in the trained, formulaic cadence, neither cold nor warm, but absolutely devoid of emotion. That professional neutrality was what made Aubrey realize she was no longer the bride of the wedding of the century, but simply a person being asked to vacate the premises for lack of qualifying stay status. A procedural downgrade, a textbook humiliation. She stood wavering, tears carving two black streams of mascara down her cheeks, while her lipstick smeared like an unfinished smile wiped halfway. She looked around. No Dylan, no friends, no bridesmaids, no one. Only the wind from the forest and the metallic click of the automatic gate opening with a cold snap. And then she did the only thing she had the strength for. She pulled out her phone and called her father. The screen reflected her face, crooked, shaken, streaked with dirt and makeup, like a lost child in a crowded market. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. Finally, someone picked up. "Dad." Her voice shattered into pieces. "Dad, they kicked me out. I don't know where to go." Harrison's voice came through the speaker, low, slow, and worst of all, perfectly calm. Aubrey. Just one word, but it made her legs collapse as if her strength had been drained. "Dad, help me, please," she sobbed, her palm still dotted with tiny glass shards, clutching the phone so hard her knuckles whitened. "I have no one. Dylan left me. The guests laughed at me. I was humiliated," she choked, her breaths hitching. The forest night felt frozen around her. Harrison spoke gently, but with the precision of a blade, finding the exact place to cut. "You erased me from the wedding, Aubrey." She gasped. No, that was... Dylan made me. I was scared. It was the door you opened," Harrison said, voice unchanged. "I only walked through it." Those simple words struck her like a spear. No shouting, no anger, no reproach. The gentleness made it hurt 10 times more. Aubrey clung to the iron gate, sliding down until her knees touched the cold ground. Her wedding dress, smeared with mud, looked like a white flag dragged across a battlefield. "Dad, I was wrong. I was stupid. I'm begging you, please come. Please help me. Don't leave me out here." Harrison inhaled slowly, and the silence between breaths made her tremble. "You're feeling what I felt before the ceremony," he said. "Left outside the door, treated as something to remove so your story could be perfect." Aubrey covered her face and sobbed, fingers shaking with mascara and mud. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted everything to look right. I wanted you to see me. I was scared you'd ruin the aesthetic." "No," Harrison said. "You were scared of the truth." The wind blew, carrying pine and lake moisture. "Dad, please, I'm so cold. You won't die," Harrison said softly. "You're just meeting the real bottom. I can't take it anymore." Aubrey groaned, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Harrison responded with a calmness more brutal than anger. "When illusions die, truth finally has room to stand." She tried to speak, but only air came out. "You chose the illusion, Aubrey," he said. "Dylan, the life you built, the photos, the parties, the people you thought were friends, you chose them over me." A second of silence, then another, long enough to feel like an entire winter. "Now you're seeing the cost of that illusion." Aubrey screamed through tears. "Dad, please don't say that. You're all I have." Harrison answered with a sentence that made her eyes fly open like she'd been splashed with ice water in the dead of night. "If you truly still have me, then I am here, listening. But I won't save you from the consequences you created," she stammered. "Dad, I'm scared." "Good," Harrison said. "Fear is the beginning of growing up." Then his voice dropped, almost a prayer, but sharp as a thin blade. "You can walk. You can stand. You will get through tonight on your own. Dad, don't hang up. Don't click." The call ended. Aubrey pressed her face against the freezing iron bars and cried like someone who had lost everything. Because she had. At that moment, she lost Dylan, lost the wedding, lost her dignity, lost the world she had built for herself. But the most brutal truth. She realized she had lost her father long before tonight, and only by standing alone in the cold, cold wood night did the thing she once called shameful become truth worth knowing. The darkness stretched around her like a widening abyss, but somewhere far away, Harrison sat in the shadow of his wooden cabin, eyes closed. Not because he was cold, not because he was hurting, but because a father knows sometimes to save your child, you must let them reach the bottom first. Night on County Route 64 fell like a thick black cloth pulled tight across the Coldwood Range. Forest winds slapped against Aubrey's face, cold as needles. The wedding dress that had once been her pride, a handcrafted Allier design from Asheville, was now soaked, torn to shreds, heavy as stones dragging her feet. With every step, the waterlogged silk scraped against the gravel-studded road, trailing behind her like a mourning veil. Aubrey pressed a hand to her stomach, breath breaking apart, her high heels long gone. She had tossed them at the resort gate after her blistered feet peeled raw, bits of skin sticking to the filthy silk like hardened wax. Her bare feet were bruised and cracked now, and when she stepped on a sharp rock, she let out a sound halfway between a sob and the whimper of someone who no longer recognized who she was. Far ahead, headlights appeared, a slash of light across tall pines. Aubrey frantically raised a hand, hoping someone would stop. But no, the car simply eased into the opposite lane, sped up, and left her swallowed in dust, especially with her looking like someone who had just escaped a drunken wreck. She heard the car's windows slam shut from afar, a cold clack that signaled people had realized she wasn't a bride in distress, but trouble walking on the road. A sedan approached next, slowed for a few seconds as if debating, then shot past. She was no longer the princess of $1 million wedding. She was a smudged white ghost wandering the night, a scene no one wanted to get involved with. Then came the first spark in the spreading humiliation. A video from a group of lingering guests near the highway. A girl's voice shrilled through someone's phone. "OMG, there's a bride walking on Highway 64. Another voice burst into laughter. "Looks like she really got dumped." Aubrey didn't hear their voices directly, but her phone buzzed with notifications, tags, mentions, new stories. She didn't dare open them. She curated a life. But tonight, that life was curating her, merciless, with the whole world watching. The dark thickened, Coldwood forest breathed on both sides like an old creature watching its prey. Moonlight struck the thin fog, glazing the road in a cold, glassy sheen. She tried lifting her dress to avoid stepping on the train, but the heavy fabric kept slipping. The scent of pine, the sour damp of weeds, and the metallic smell of blood from her feet mixed until her throat tightened. The wind grew colder. By mile 2, she began shaking uncontrollably. By mile 3, her toes went numb. By mile 4, she walked as if inside a nightmare. Everything slow, heavy, painful, and every time she reached for the hope that her father might come to get her, she heard again that stone-cold voice. "You barred me from the wedding. I only followed the door you opened." She told herself to keep walking, though she had no idea how much strength was left. What she didn't know was this. 200 meters behind her, the yellow headlights of Harrison's old Ford truck were following steadily. He drove slower than a cautious deer, always keeping enough distance that she wouldn't sense him, but close enough that if a car swerved, a wild animal charged, or a stranger approached, he could intervene within 1 second. He saw everything. The way she staggered, trying to stay upright. The way she wiped her face only to smear it worse. The way the once stream-like dress had become chains, clinging to her as if reminding her that every wrong choice carried weight. Harrison tightened his grip on the wheel, not from pain, but from a father's heart being torn between instinct to save and the knowledge that if he saved her now, she would never grow. The night stretched on as if mocking them both. By mile 5, Aubrey no longer looked like a bride, no longer like a woman, not even like an adult. She looked like a child thrown out of the pretty world she herself had built. A gust of wind hit, dragging her dress sideways. She tripped over an exposed tree root, collapsing under the freezing ground, her knees striking gravel hard enough to tear skin. She lay still for several seconds, as if wanting to sleep right there, as if wanting to disappear. Then she slowly pushed herself up. Her palms were covered in dirt and bits of crushed leaves. Her hair was tangled, matted with mud. Her face smeared, features blurred beyond recognition. But she kept walking, one step, then another. When the faint glow of the cabin finally appeared at the end of the road, a thin, trembling yellow dot, Aubrey broke into voiceless tears. It was the shack, she once mocked, the place she had said didn't fit the wedding aesthetic. Now it was the only light in the darkness. She dragged her ruined body up the pine-littered path, gripping the old wooden railing she used to cling to when playing hide-and-seek as a child. She didn't know that while she was still stumbling up the last slope, Harrison had already driven his truck around to the back trail, slipped inside through the rear door, the one whose hinges he oiled on purpose so they would never make a sound. He cut the back lights, walked into the living room, and stood behind the front door like a man who had planned every step in advance. She had only enough strength left to knock. One knock, then another. Then she rested her forehead against the wooden door, her whole body shaking, breath ragged like someone who had just escaped a blizzard. Her voice cracked into a thin thread, but she still managed 3 words. "Dad, it hurts." The wind rushed through the doorframe and answered her before the man inside could, and the cold wood night fell back into silence, the silence of a lesson hitting bottom. The old wooden cabin door lit up with a warm yellow glow from inside, but it did not open wide the way Aubrey expected. Instead, it opened only to a narrow slit, about 4 inches, just enough for the light to spill across her mascara-smeared face, and just enough for the security chain inside to stretch taut, holding everything at the exact distance Harrison had planned. The light revealed her features clearly: swollen eyes, trembling lips. Dirt and rain streaked across her cheeks like a painting ruined by a sudden storm. Harrison stood inside, his shadow cast across the wooden wall, straight, solid, unmoving. He looked at his daughter through the slit, as one might look at someone who had wandered too far from reality, and his voice came through, not raised, not harsh, but sharp as a scalpel. "Do you know why I opened this door only 4 in?" Aubrey could only gasp through a choking "so," her shoulders trembling. Harrison continued, each word landing exactly where it belonged. "Because the truth only needs a slit that small to get in." She broke down crying, the sound ragged in the night, but he didn't open the door wider, didn't comfort her, didn't hold her. He forced her to face the distance she had once created when she said, "Dad doesn't fit my aesthetic." Harrison drew a slow breath, then delivered the first blow that shattered every illusion the entire wedding. $86,500 I paid. Aubrey reeled as if struck. He paused, then continued, slow and precise as a needle. "I paid not because I wanted to force myself into your wedding. I paid because the resort required a guarantor. Dylan didn't have a dime, no deposit, no balance, not a cent. He used maxed-out cards to buy the ring, to hire fake parents, and used a fake company name to show off. People thought he was successful because you let him build that illusion. Without my signature, Coalwood Summit would have canceled your wedding last week. I paid to protect your dignity, to keep the wedding from collapsing before it even started. And most importantly, I paid to maintain the right to activate Clause 14C. You think everyone knows about that clause? No. Only the payer does. I didn't save Dylan. I saved you from an even bigger humiliation." Tears streamed down her face. Harrison continued. Aubrey collapsed, a broken sob escaping her like the last string snapping. Harrison didn't move, his hands resting on the door, his voice lowering but never softening. And another truth, the one you never ask about, never wanted to know, never dared to face. He looked straight into her reened eyes. "Coalwood Retreats is mine." Aubrey froze, her hands gripping the doorframe, going limp. Harrison kept going. 27 cabins, 3 lodges, this entire region, and the forest you walked through every time you called my cabin poor, rural, or not aesthetic enough. He stopped long enough for her to hear the collapse of the world she believed in. "I built this place with my own hands and your mother's. Every plank, every stone, every nail. I stayed in this cabin not because I was poor, but because this is the last place your mother left her warmth." A strangled sob tore from Aubrey's throat before she fell fully to her knees on the porch, gripping the edge of the door like a child begging to be let in. "Dad, I didn't know." Harrison narrowed his eyes, not in anger, but in pain. "You didn't know? Because you never asked. You only spoke, only demanded, only wanted your life to look beautiful online." He leaned down, reached his hand through the 4-inch gap, not to pull her up, but to place 2 items into her hands, a key and a sealed envelope. "Here," Harrison said, "is the key to Unit 4B, Willowbrook Apartments. A small place safe, enough for you to live, enough for you to start over. I paid 3 months ahead. After that, on your own." Aubrey's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside wasn't money, but a job offer. Waitress position at Cedar Bridge Cafe, 10 minutes from the cabin. She stared up at him, disbelief, shaking her voice. "Dad, why?" "Because you need a job to stand on your own," Harrison said, voice low but steady. "And because I cannot save you if you still believe you're living a life you cannot carry." She cried again, softer this time, weaker, honest like a child left alone on a long road. Harrison looked down at her and spoke his final words. Words he had prepared since 4 months ago. The day she said he didn't fit her aesthetic and pushed him out of her big moment. "Tonight is not punishment. It's a lesson." He slid the chain slightly, the clink of metal sharp as a surgical tray. "Tonight you stand before your own door, and I will say this only once." He held her gaze, not with hatred, not with anger, only with the cold truth of a father who still loved his child, but could not indulge her any longer. "1 year of standing on your own, and I take you back." He tightened the gap of the door to punctuate his decision. "1 step backward, and I cut you off." Aubrey gasped. "Dad, please don't." Harrison shook his head slowly. "No one grows up in arms that open too easily. You must walk on the same feet that tonight you let touch the cold ground." He released the door. When illusion dies, truth finally has room to stand. The door closed. The 4-inch gap remained, only enough for a thin stream of light to leak into the cold wood night, like a reminder that sometimes to save a child, a father must let her break before she rises. Unit 4, B at Willowbrook Apartments, was nothing like the place Aubrey once imagined she'd live. Low ceiling, beige walls with old paint, a window facing a parking lot streaked with oil stains, and wood flooring warped slightly from last year's storm. But the apartment passed the county fire code, fireproof door, new smoke alarms, sprinkler system working, which meant it was safe, and safety was the first thing Aubrey had regained in months. She set her torn suitcase on the floor, switched on the kitchen light, the fluorescent bulb flickering twice before staying on. The place was cold, quiet, and completely devoid of anything aesthetic like what she used to post online, but she knew this was where she started over. On the first morning, Aubrey put on a black button-down, tied her hair back, and stepped into Ruby's Diner, a place known for its pancakes but also for picky customers and wages. So low, most people lasted exactly 4 weeks. She was assigned the morning shift, Station 2. First tasks, wipe down, align fork and knife exactly 1 inch apart, and memorize a menu of 12 items. Things she once considered trivial now felt like a mountain. The moment she stepped behind the counter, a middle-aged man snapped. "Miss, I've been waiting 3 minutes." Aubrey flinched and rushed over. The man squinted. "You knew. You look like some city hot girl who took a wrong turn." Behind her, a Navajo corker named Marcy snorted. "Hot girl working here? Welcome to the real world, honey." Aubrey's face burned, but she said nothing. She remembered her father's words. 1 year on your own, pain included. At noon, she brought out an order of 3 pancakes, but the customer complained the syrup wasn't the right sweetness and demanded a replacement. She apologized, remade it, then got scolded again. "You spilled 2 drops of syrup. Seriously?" By evening shift, a customer left a $17 bill, but moved the tip line aside and wrote in pen, "Maybe smile more." She held the receipt, her hands shaking, but her face stayed calm. That night in Unit 4B, Aubrey checked her wallet. After 1 week as a waitress, she had $72 left to survive the month. Laundry on the ground floor cost $2.50 a load. With grease-covered works clothes, she needed 2 loads. Total, $5. She looked at the electric bill taped to the table. $41.30. Cheapest internet, $19.99. With no way out, she closed her eyes, took her broken Gucci heels, ruined on one side, grabbed bargain glue from Dollar Tree, and tried to fix them. For the first time in her life, she was repairing instead of replacing, and that made her cry. Not because she was poor, but because she realized she had lived as if the world existed to serve her, a privilege wrapped in naivety. In the weeks that followed, the humiliation no longer came from others. It came from within. She hated the grease smell, hated the clang of ladles on pans, hated the long sighs of customers asking for refills. But she still carried the coffee pot from table to table. One day, 2 college YouTubers recorded a vlog loud enough for her to hear. "Bro, isn't that Aubrey from those How to Live a Soft Life videos? Look at her now waitressing." They laughed. She didn't respond, but that night she lay staring at the ceiling as tears slid sideways into her ears. During a late shift, a young group left exactly 1 penny as a tip. 1 penny. Aubrey stared at that tiny coin, gleaming under the diner lights like a punctuation mark of humiliation. Then she picked it up and pocketed it. Not because it had value, but because it reminded her everything begins at the bottom. Then, like a tiny crack forming on thick ice, change began. One stormy night, rain pounding the windows, Marcy pushed open the freezer room door and handed Aubrey a hot chocolate. "Here," Marcy said, "nobody gets through the first weeks without crying. You're not bad, you're just new." It was the first kind thing Aubrey had heard in months. The next day, she served an elderly couple. The husband said, "Thank you, dear. You've been lovely." A small compliment, grain-sized, but it hit the deepest part of her heart. Then came small steps. She learned to calculate tip down to the cent, knew the busy hours to swap shifts for extra money, learned ramen only needed half a flavor packet to save sodium, learned to adjust schedules for 1 night off, learned to borrow books from the public library about minimalist living, learned that when life strips away everything beautiful, all that remains is character. One late night after a long shift, Aubrey stood on the balcony of Unit 4B, looking at the distant lights of Coalwood Retreats, where her father lived, the place she once scorned. She didn't know if he could see her light on every night, but she knew one thing. For the first time in years, she was changing. Not because she wanted to be loved again, but because she wanted to become someone worthy of love. She whispered into the wind, her voice carried into the dark. "Dad, I'm trying." And for the first time since the ruined wedding night, the light in her eyes wasn't the glow of fantasy, but the glow of someone truly learning to stand on her own feet. Harrison never showed up at the door of Unit 4B, never knocked, never left anything on the doormat. He didn't want to create the illusion that his daughter was being watched or guarded. For Aubrey to truly grow up, she had to believe. No one was holding her up, no one was cushioning her fall, and every step she took rested on her own legs. But he was still a father, and a father's heart, no matter how hurt, still clenched at the words, "Dad, I'm in so much pain on that freezing cold wood night." So Harrison chose the only way that satisfied both discipline and instinct. Every 3 weeks, always on a Thursday night, he drove his moss-green old truck to the end of Willowbrook Street, turned off the lights, lowered the window 1 inch, and silently watched from afar. Not close enough for Aubrey to notice, not far enough that he wouldn't reach her in a second if something happened. It was the only compromise between duty and love. Autumn drifted by slowly, then quickly, then blew away like the yellow leaves torn off their branches. The first Thursday night, Harrison saw Aubrey walking home after a late shift, holding a cheap grocery bag, her face still carrying the exhaustion of an 8-hour day. But something made him look longer. She was holding an umbrella over Marcy, the coworker who once teased her as a hot girl who strayed into reality. Marcy shivered under her wet coat, clutching a stack of damp order tickets. Aubrey tilted the umbrella so much that her own left shoulder was soaked so the other woman could stay dry. Harrison tightened his grip on the steering wheel, not from worry, but from pride. A cold, quiet kind of pride he refused to let escape into sound. 3 weeks later, autumn was brushing up against winter. More leaves on the ground, sharper wind. Harrison stopped at the same corner. This time, he saw Aubrey walking beside an elderly lady with silver hair and a slow gait. The woman was pushing a heavy grocery cart with one wheel jammed. Young people passed by without a glance, but Aubrey stopped. She crouched, checked the wheel, lifted the cart's front with both hands, and realigned the axle. The old woman thanked her in a trembling voice. Aubrey simply smiled. No looking around, no waiting for praise, no recording it for social media. She helped and moved on as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Harrison leaned back in his seat, watching her shadow stretch across the asphalt under the streetlight. That wasn't the Aubrey from a year ago, the one who curated every frame for her soft life Instagram posts. This was a different Aubrey, a real person. 3 weeks later, snow began to fall. Willowbrook Apartments looked like a cheap Christmas postcard. But beneath that prettiness was a biting cold that made people run straight indoors. Harrison turned on the heater, stopped in his usual spot, pulled his coat tighter. He saw Aubrey step out of Ruby's diner, wearing a thick jacket everyone could tell was secondhand from the Goodwill shop down the street. A shiny SUV, the type of car Dylan once dreamed of driving, rolled up beside her. The window lowered. A young man's voice, loud enough for Harrison to hear, called out, "Hey, sweetheart! Cold night! Need a ride?" Aubrey stood tall, looked at the man for a few seconds. In that moment, Harrison felt his breath slow because this was the real test. A year ago, Aubrey would have climbed in, smiled prettily, shown off a designer bag, and posted a story captioned, "Unexpected kindness." But tonight, in front of whoever was watching, she shook her head. "No, I'm fine walking." The man scoffed and said something flirty, but Aubrey didn't care. She turned away, pulled up her hood, and walked through the snow calmly. No shame, no hurry. Harrison felt a thin layer of ice inside his chest melt. 3 more weeks. Winter fully settled over the town. The nights were colder, people sharper. On one Thursday night, Harrison saw Aubrey behind Ruby's, talking to a new hire. The boy looked panicked, holding a shift schedule, voice trembling. "I think the manager fired me." Aubrey rested a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. Everyone messes up the first day. Let me show you." And for 5 whole minutes, she went through open shift procedures, order taking, handling difficult customers. Her face calm, mature, natural, like someone who'd been there for years. No princess tone, no fragile ego of someone once spoiled, only a person who knew how to live. Harrison tilted his head, studying her. The daughter he once feared had drowned in social media illusions, was becoming someone he wasn't sure he could have taught her to be if life hadn't done the teaching for him. Then came a March evening, no more snow, just the damp breath of the woods. Harrison stopped at the same corner, and this time he saw something that kept him silent for a long time. Aubrey was walking home, but she wasn't looking at the ground like before. She was looking up at the sky, her steps light, her shoulders loose, no fear, no sense of running away. She was tired but not broken, broke but not bitter, alone but not despairing. And for the first time, Harrison told himself quietly, "This girl, she's really growing up." He started the engine, reversed out of the corner, and left before she could ever see a shadow. For the first time in months, he didn't feel the need to watch longer because he had seen enough. Aubrey was no longer someone he had to save. She was becoming someone who would save herself. A full year, 4 seasons, slipped past the Smoky Mountains like a thin streak of light. Gold autumn, white winter, early green spring, soft blooming summer. Ruby's diner still sat on the corner of Maple, same as always, its red neon sign frayed at the edges but glowing before sunrise. That morning, Aubrey tightened her apron, tied her hair back, and moved through the hiss of bacon, the clink of glassware, and the drifting scent of coffee. A year of waitressing no longer made her tremble, no longer made her fumble, no longer sent panic through her chest at the sound of a customer calling her name. Today felt ordinary until she walked out from behind the counter with a pot of coffee. Table 11, window seat. A man was sitting there, dark cap, old flannel, one work-worn hand resting palm up on the wooden table. She poured without looking up. "Would you like sugar, sir?" His voice answered, earth deep, steady, familiar enough to freeze her spine. "No, I'm not here to drink. I'm here to talk." Aubrey froze. The coffee pot stopped mid-air. She didn't dare raise her head, but her hand trembled once. She whispered, "Dad." Harrison gently slid a brown envelope across to her. Not the cheap Dollar Tree kind, the fiber-extured premium stock used by Colwood Retreats. The writing on the front was his, simple, firm. "Welcome back, Junior Operations Associate." Aubrey covered her mouth, tears spilling instantly. Not because of the job, not because of the title, but because of 2 words. Welcome back. For a year, she had never once dared ask when she might return, never once dared hope for forgiveness. She knew forgiveness wasn't a gift, it was the result of a journey. Harrison said, his voice no longer as cold as that night she knocked on the cabin door, but still waited like a man who'd once been pushed into the dark by his own child. "I've watched long enough. Not every day, not hovering, just watching you grow." Aubrey choked out, "Dad, I need to pay you back for the wedding." She pulled out a thick envelope from her bag. It was her tips from 12 months. $2 a day, some days 5, some weeks only 60 cents. But she saved everything. She set the envelope on the table. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not drop. Lana, the manager, walked by, stopped dead the moment she realized what she was seeing. The entire diner went silent for a heartbeat. Harrison looked at the envelope, then pushed it back. "Aubrey," he said, voice as steady and clean as Blue Willow Lake at sunrise. "I don't need fast, I need real." Aubrey cried, but she didn't hide her face this time. Tears soaked her apron, disappearing into the fabric. The man before her wasn't a father triumphant. He was a father who had endured hurt and still found a way to open a door inside himself again. Harrison stood. "When your shift ends, come with me. There's a place you need to go." Aubrey followed. No question, no guesswork, just trust. Harrison's moss-green truck stopped at the gate of Colwood Summit, the place where her wedding had collapsed into humiliation a year ago. The wooden board hung on the gate. Mark had placed it there under the automatic protocol of 14C, having no idea Aubrey was the owner's daughter because Harrison always used the name Hank. For a year, she'd walked past this place without ever lifting her eyes toward it. Today, the sign was gone. Harrison stepped forward and used a key with a pine cone fob to unlock the old latch. The gate swung open, but he didn't go first. He tilted his head toward her. "You go ahead, because today you're not entering as a delusional princess," he paused, "but as someone who knows how to stand on her own 2 feet. Aubrey looked down the stone path leading to the courtyard, where chandeliers once dimmed mid-ceremony, where music cut out. where friends recorded clips, where her whole life shattered. Every step she took felt like walking through memory, through ridicule, through the sneers, through the streaked mascara in the mirror. But today she walked straight. No trembling, no bowed head, no flinching, just walking. Inside, staff were setting up for the spring conference. When the doors opened, every head turned. A few recognized her. Once they might have whispered. Today, no one said a word. For someone who climbed up from the bottom, silence is sometimes the highest form of respect. Harrison stood behind her, watching the way she held herself in the grand hall, the same place she had once collapsed under the weight of illusion. He said softly, like wind through the blue willow forest, "Finally, you're shining the right way." Aubrey turned back. Her smile, her first in a year without fear, found him. "Dad, thank you for letting me fall." Harrison looked at his daughter, the one who once lost herself in false light, now standing in the glow she built from within. "In the Smoky Mountains," he said, like the closing line of a long journey, there are two kinds of people, those who chase borrowed light and those who learn to shine from within. Aubrey inhaled deeply, standing in the center of Colwood Summit, the place that once broke her. But this time she stood like someone who rebuilt herself from cold ground, from blistered soles, from ramen nights and diner shifts. This time she's shown not loudly, not theatrically, not for an audience, simply, honestly. If you've ever lived through a year where the world turned its back on you, where you had to rise from ruin, where you had to become real instead of pretty, leave a single, so I know you're still here. And if you want more stories where justice doesn't arrive with shouting, but with silence heavy as stone, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next story where true light always follows the